Skol Vikings, let's win this game.
Vikings fan. Something about this offseason feels different, and I don't know if that should make Vikings fans excited or nervous, because while the national media keeps questioning this team, inside that building the pressure is getting real. Veteran leaders are suddenly fighting for their future. Young stars are hearing blunt truths, and one decision involving the quarterback room could shape the next decade of football in Minnesota. The closer we get to training camp, the more this thing starts to feel like a crossroads for the purple and gold. And you can already feel the tension building. There's a feeling hanging over this defense right now that nobody really wants to admit out loud, because replacing production like that is never easy, especially when the guy leaving was one of the few players consistently collapsing pockets every single week. When Minnesota moved on from Jonathan Greenard this offseason, it sent a message. They believe the future is already inside the building. They believe Dallas Turner is ready. But now the speculation has started creeping in from outside the organization, and one name connected to the Vikings this week definitely grabbed attention. KAYVON THIBODEAUX. The Giants' edge rusher suddenly being floated as a possible target for Minnesota feels like the kind of rumor that starts small and then grows legs fast if the season gets rocky early. Jake Beckman from Fansided connected the dots after the Giants loaded up their defensive front again, and honestly, from a football perspective, it's not hard to understand why people are intrigued. THIBODEAUX still flashes elite athleticism. He still pressures quarterbacks. Last season, he posted 32 pressures with 3 sacks and showed enough disruption to remind people why he was drafted so high in the first place. And in Brian Flores' system, pressure off the edge changes entire games. But this is where it gets complicated emotionally for Vikings fans. Because if Minnesota actually starts looking outside the building for pass rush help, what does that say about Dallas Turner? This is supposed to be his moment, his opportunity to become the next feared defender in purple and gold. Ben Lieber basically said it himself. This year isn't just important for Turner, it's defining. He's no longer a rotational athlete flashing upside in limited snaps. He's expected to become a 3-down force. The guy offenses game plan around. And replacing Greenard's production is not some casual assignment. Even when Greenard missed sacks, he still consistently got home and affected games. That matters in Flores' defense. Pressure changes everything. One extra second for a quarterback can completely flip a drive. So now Vikings fans are caught in that uncomfortable space between patience and urgency. You want Turner to explode because this franchise desperately needs young stars to develop organically. But at the same time, if the edge group struggles early, rumors like THIBODEAUX won't go away, especially with Flores coaching this defense aggressively every single week. What also makes this situation strange is the timing. Minnesota still doesn't have full long-term clarity in the front office structure after all the recent organizational changes, and even Beckman pointed out how risky it would feel making aggressive trades without complete stability upstairs. That's the kind of thing fans notice now. We've seen too many franchises panic before and regret it later. But if Turner breaks out, if he finally becomes that violent, explosive pass rusher Vikings Nation has been waiting on, then all of this noise disappears overnight. And honestly, that pressure sitting on his shoulders right now feels enormous. Sometimes the hardest conversations in football are the ones involving players you genuinely don't want to imagine leaving. Because for a long time now, there's been comfort knowing one spot on this offensive line was locked down every Sunday. Reliable, tough, quietly elite. And now suddenly there are whispers that the clock may actually be ticking on Brian O'Neill's time in Minnesota. That one hurts to even say out loud. Adam New from Vikings territory brought up something fans are starting to notice more and more with this franchise lately. The Vikings are getting younger, more aggressive financially, more willing to move off expensive veterans before decline hits. We've watched it happen already this offseason. And when you look at O'Neill entering the final year of that 5-year, $92.5 million contract, you can see why questions are starting. He'll be 32 next year, his cap hit is significant, and Minnesota surprisingly didn't rush to extend him this offseason when many expected it. That silence says something, maybe more than people want to admit. But here's the emotional side of this story that stats alone can't fully capture. Brian O'Neill has been one of the few stabilizing forces this franchise has had through coaching changes, quarterback chaos, heartbreaking seasons, and roster turnover. Since 2018, he's represented consistency, and not fake consistency either, real production. The guy earned an 81.6 PFF grade last season and continues to play high-level football in both pass protection and the run game. That's not easy in today's NFL, especially with how much offenses ask tackles to do now. Kevin O'Connell's offense depends on protection holding up, especially with uncertainty still lingering around the quarterback situation. And honestly, losing a player like O'Neill creates ripple effects far beyond one position. Young quarterbacks need veteran protection. Locker rooms need respected voices. You can't replace that overnight. We've seen offensive lines fall apart fast in this league once one cornerstone disappears. Still, football is ruthless when age and money collide. That's just reality. The Vikings may look at the bigger picture and decide they can't commit massive money to another contract deep into his 30s, especially if injuries become more frequent. Last season's MCL sprain reminded everyone that even durable veterans eventually start carrying more physical risk, and Vikings fans know how quickly offensive line depth can collapse when stability disappears up front. That's why this season feels emotional already, because every snap O'Neal takes could quietly become part of a farewell tour nobody's openly acknowledging yet. And if he plays another strong season, the pressure shifts right back onto the organization. Do you reward loyalty and performance again? Or do you fully commit to getting younger, no matter how difficult it feels emotionally? That answer could end up telling fans a lot about the future direction of this franchise. You can feel the tension building around one of the most talented young playmakers on this roster, because this season suddenly feels less about potential and more about trust. That's the word that keeps hovering around Jordan Addison right now. Trust. Not talent, not route running, not explosiveness. Trust. And honestly, that changes everything about how fans are viewing him heading into 2026. The conversation got louder after reports connected Addison to possible trade speculation involving the Indianapolis Colts. Jake Beckman threw the idea out there after Minnesota signed Juwan Jennings, suggesting the Vikings could eventually consider moving the former USC star if they don't feel comfortable investing huge money into him long term. And when you first hear that, it almost sounds ridiculous, because when Addison is locked in mentally, he changes this offense. He creates separation naturally. He stretches defenses vertically. He takes pressure off Justin Jefferson in ways few receivers can. Defensive coordinators have to account for him every single snap. But then you look at last season, and the concerns become harder to ignore. The production dipped hard. Career lows in catches, yards, and touchdowns. 7 drops after barely having any early in his career. And yes, the quarterback situation absolutely contributed to that chaos. Nobody's pretending the offense had stability last year, but Chip Scoggins said something that probably hit Vikings fans harder than they expected. He called this a contract year not just for Addison's play on the field, but for proving he can be trusted off the field too. That's the part that sticks. Because talent has never been the question here. Maturity is. Focus is. Consistency is. Minnesota already exercised the 5th-year option, which shows they haven't given up on him whatsoever. But long-term money changes how organizations evaluate everything, especially when the roster already has major financial decisions looming elsewhere. And then there's the emotional football side of this. Vikings fans have watched too many dynamic offensive duos break apart over the years. When Addison and Jefferson are rolling together, this offense feels dangerous. It feels modern. It feels capable of surviving even messy quarterback situations because elite receivers can erase mistakes. That kind of firepower is hard to replace once it's gone. Losing that possibility would sting. At the same time, you understand why the organization may eventually hesitate if the distractions continue or the production doesn't bounce back. The Colts rumor itself may not mean much today, but rumors like this usually don't appear from nowhere. They appear when uncertainty exists behind closed doors. So now all eyes shift toward training camp. Because if Addison returns focused, explosive, and hungry, the conversation changes fast. But if the inconsistency lingers, Vikings fans may slowly start preparing for a future they never really wanted to imagine. I honestly think this next storyline could emotionally split this fan base more than anything else happening right now, because Vikings fans are trying to figure out whether patience still exists in modern football, or whether fear already took over the conversation. The minute Minnesota brought Kyler Murray into the building, everything around J.J. McCarthy changed. The optimism shifted. The security disappeared. Suddenly, the young quarterback the franchise traded up for became the guy fighting just to hold on to his future. And if we're being real, last season didn't help calm anybody down. Injuries again, missed time again, inconsistent play when he was healthy, 11 touchdowns against 12 interceptions, some flashes, some ugly moments, a lot of uncertainty, the kind that keeps fan bases arguing all offseason long. But here's where things get really interesting emotionally. An NFC scout came out this week and basically warned the Vikings against making a massive mistake. His message was blunt. Giving up on McCarthy now would be reckless. And honestly, I think a lot of Vikings fans quietly agree with that even while feeling frustrated. People forget how chaotic the start of his career has been already. The preseason knee injury that wiped out his rookie year completely changed his development timeline. Then 2025 essentially became his real rookie season while dealing with more physical setbacks and instability around him. That's not exactly the ideal environment for a young quarterback trying to establish confidence. Kevin O'Connell now has to manage one of the trickiest situations of his coaching career, because Kyler Murray wasn't brought here to sit quietly forever. Carson Wentz returning adds another layer too. This quarterback room suddenly feels tense before camp even starts. Every throw McCarthy makes during preseason is going to be dissected. Every interception will trigger reactions. Every good drive will reignite hope. One preseason game could completely swing the conversation for a week. That's life as a first-round quarterback in this league, especially in a market starving for long-term stability under center. But I keep coming back to one thought. We've seen organizations panic too early before. Baker Mayfield looked broken in Cleveland until he wasn't. Young quarterbacks sometimes develop slower than fans and media allow. And McCarthy still has traits that made Minnesota believe in him enough to draft him 10th overall. Mobility, toughness, leadership, competitive fire, those things matter, especially inside a locker room searching for belief at the most important position in sports. But this offseason absolutely matters too. Maybe more than any period of his football life so far. Because if he walks into camp sharper, healthier, and more composed, the narrative shifts again. Suddenly, the future doesn't feel so cloudy. But if the struggles continue while Murray looks polished and explosive, the pressure inside that building could become overwhelming fast. And Vikings fans know exactly how dangerous quarterback uncertainty can become once doubt fully enters the locker room. And then there's the part that always fuels this franchise emotionally: respect. Or honestly, the lack of it. Because even after all the excitement around this roster, even with 4 primetime games sitting on the schedule, national analysts still aren't fully buying into Minnesota. You can feel it. The hesitation, the skepticism, the quiet belief that the Vikings are interesting, but not truly dangerous. And when those primetime rankings dropped this week, it became impossible not to notice. The Monday Night Football matchup against Buffalo landed only 9th out of 17 games according to The Athletic. 9th, for a rematch involving Josh Allen, Justin Jefferson, 2 tortured fan bases with 0-4 Super Bowl records, and memories of one of the greatest regular season games ever played back in 2022. Vikings fans remember every second of that chaos at Highmark Stadium. That game felt legendary. Yet somehow the national conversation still feels cautious around Minnesota, maybe even dismissive at times. Then it got worse. The Sunday night showdown against Detroit ranked 10th according to PFF, despite the fact Kevin O'Connell's group swept the Lions last season. Swept them, including that emotional Christmas win that completely flipped the narrative around this rivalry. But outside Minnesota, people still seem more willing to trust Detroit's ceiling than the Vikings' consistency. And honestly, maybe the quarterback uncertainty is driving all of it. Because the Week 11 matchup against San Francisco and Mexico City dropped all the way to 13th. 13th. Even with Brian Flores coaching one of the nastiest defenses in football the past 2 years. Even with Jefferson still capable of turning any game into a spectacle. The national media keeps circling back to one concern. They don't fully know who this Vikings team is yet. And maybe that's fair. Maybe Minnesota still has major questions to answer. But if you've followed this franchise long enough, you know disrespect has always fueled this fan base differently. Vikings Nation doesn't need everyone believing. In some strange way, doubt almost sharpens the identity of this team. It creates that us against everybody feeling that fans here embrace naturally. Sometimes that's when this franchise becomes the most dangerous. Still, these rankings matter emotionally because they reveal how the league currently views Minnesota. Talented, intriguing, dangerous on the right night, but not fully trusted. Not yet. And honestly, that might become the emotional fuel behind this entire 2026 season once the lights finally come on. That's why this season already feels heavier than a normal offseason ever should. There are careers being evaluated, futures being questioned, young stars trying to prove they belong, veterans fighting to stay part of the foundation, and somewhere in the middle of all that, Vikings Nation is doing what it always does, holding on to hope while bracing for the emotional roller coaster that comes with loving this team. Because no matter how many times this franchise tests people emotionally, fans keep showing up. But I'll say this right now, if this locker room comes together, if Kevin O'Connell steadies the quarterback situation, and if the young core finally takes that next step, the rest of the league might regret doubting the purple and gold all over again. Let me know which storyline you're watching closest heading into camp, because something tells me this offseason tension is only getting started. Stay tuned. Skol Vikings, let's go!